The doors to the underground throne room hadn't opened in 300 years, but Kira Sinclair's trembling hands pushed them apart anyway, driven by desperation that eclipsed her fear. The stone groaned as she stumbled inside, her worn sneakers slipping on marble so ancient it predated the city above. Moonlight filtered through narrow windows carved into the earth itself, illuminating a cavernous space that stole the breath from her lungs. Columns stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadow, each one carved with symbols that seemed to writhe in the dim light. And there, upon a throne of obsidian and silver, sat a figure so perfectly still he might have been carved from the same stone. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard the stories whispered in the hidden vampire courts beneath New York, the rumors that circulated among those brave or foolish enough to seek audience with the old ones. The Vampire King, Valdimir Noctis, ancient beyond measure, beautiful beyond description, and utterly silent. Some said a curse had stolen his voice. Others claimed he'd simply grown too disgusted with the world to speak to it anymore. Most said approaching him meant death. But Kira's sister was dying, and she'd exhausted every other option. "Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice cracking. The acoustics of the throne room carried her words, amplifying them until they echoed back at her like accusations of audacity. The figure on the throne didn't move. White hair cascaded over broad shoulders, falling almost to his waist in waves that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. His skin was pale as bone china, flawless and luminous. He wore black clothing that seemed to be from another century, a long coat with silver fastenings, fitted trousers, boots that rose to his knees. His hands rested on the arms of the throne, long fingers adorned with rings that caught the moonlight. His eyes were closed. Kira took another step forward, her legs threatening to give out. She'd come so far. 3 months of research, of following rumors through the vampire underground, of trading favors she couldn't afford to trade. She'd learned about the old passages beneath the city, the forgotten entrances to the court that had been sealed when Valdimir had withdrawn from the world. She'd found this one through sheer stubborn determination and the help of a vampire named Lucian, who'd taken pity on her cause. "Please," she said louder now. "I know I shouldn't be here. I know approaching you is forbidden. But my sister is dying, and you're the only one who can help her." Nothing. Not even a flicker of acknowledgement. If not for the slight rise and fall of his chest, she might have thought him truly dead rather than undead. Kira's eyes burned with frustrated tears. She's only 19. She has her whole life ahead of her. A vampire named Cassius gave her his blood as a game, just enough to start the turning but not enough to complete it. He's refusing to finish what he started, and she's trapped between human and vampire, dying by degrees. Every healer I've found says only someone with ancient blood can stabilize her now, can give her the choice to complete the turning or reverse it. She was babbling now, words spilling out in a desperate rush. "They say you're the oldest, the most powerful, that your blood could cure anything, break any curse, fix any mistake. I don't have money or power to offer you. I'm just a human, just a bartender who lives above a laundry in Brooklyn. But I'll give you anything. Do anything. Please. Just save my sister." Her voice broke on the last word, and the sound of her sob echoed through the vast chamber. Kira sank to her knees, exhaustion and despair finally overwhelming her. She'd been running on adrenaline and hope for so long that their absence left her hollow. "Please," she whispered one final time, the word barely audible. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then she heard it, a soft exhale, the whisper of fabric moving. Kira looked up through her tears to find that Valdimir's eyes had opened. They were silver, pure, molten silver, without white or pupil, ancient and fathomless. They fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel transparent, as though he could see through flesh and bone to the very essence of who she was. The weight of that gaze was almost physical, pressing down on her until she could barely breathe. He stood, the movement fluid and inhuman in its grace. He was tall, well over 6 feet, his frame lean but clearly powerful beneath the elegant clothing. As he descended the steps from his throne, Kira noticed that his feet made no sound on the stone. He moved like smoke, like shadow, like something that existed between one heartbeat and the next. He stopped 3 feet from where she knelt, towering over her. This close, she could see the perfection of his features, the sharp angle of his jaw, the aristocratic nose, lips that would have been sensual if they weren't pressed into such a hard line. He looked perhaps 30 in human years, but his eyes betrayed millennia of existence. Valdimir stared down at her, and Kira held his gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away, to flee, to do anything but remain locked in the attention of a predator so far above her on the food chain they might as well be different species. Then he did something that shocked her to her core. His lips parted, and he drew in a breath as though preparing to speak. His expression flickered confusion, frustration, something almost like pain crossing those perfect features. His hand lifted to his throat, fingers pressing against the pale skin there. No sound emerged. He tried again, his jaw working, his entire body tensing with effort. Nothing. The silence stretched and twisted until Kira felt it like a third presence in the room. Understanding crashed over her. The curse was real. He literally couldn't speak. "You want to help," Kira said slowly, watching his face for confirmation. "But you can't tell me. You can't communicate." Valdimir's eyes flashed with something that might have been relief. He nodded once, a sharp, precise movement. Kira's mind raced. "Can you write?" He shook his head, then made a gesture with his hand showing her his fingers curling into a fist, trembling, as though he lacked control of them. When he'd been speaking, trying to speak, had the curse extended to all forms of communication? "But you can hear me," Kira said. "You understand everything I'm saying." Another nod. His silver eyes hadn't left her face, studying her with an intensity that should have been terrifying, but instead felt almost curious, as though he hadn't seen anything interesting enough to hold his attention in centuries. "What if I ask yes or no questions? Can you nod or shake your head?" A longer pause, then a slow nod, as though even that simple motion required careful consideration. Kira pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Now that she was standing, she felt the full impact of his presence. The cold power that radiated from him like winter wind, the sense of barely contained strength that made her hyper-aware of how fragile her human body was. But she'd come too far to falter now. "Will you help my sister?" she asked. "Will you give her your blood to stabilize her?" Valdimir tilted his head, considering. Then he reached out, and before Kira could flinch away, his fingers brushed her cheek. They were cold as ice, but gentle. Surprisingly so. He seemed to be studying her, evaluating something she couldn't name. He nodded. Relief crashed through her so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much. I can bring her here, or if you tell me where." He held up a hand, silencing her. Then he gestured toward himself, then toward her, then made a walking motion with his fingers. "You want to come with me? To see her yourself?" A nod. "She's in a safe house in Red Hook, about 20 minutes by car." Kira hesitated. Can you travel? I mean, during the day?" Valdimir's expression flickered with something that might have been amusement. He raised an eyebrow, then gestured broadly to the cavernous throne room, to the windows through which moonlight streamed. His meaning was clear. Did she really think he'd be trapped somewhere without proper protections? "Right," Kira said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Of course. You've probably forgotten more about surviving as a vampire than I'll ever know." She glanced at those windows again. "It's about 3 in the morning now. We could go immediately if you're willing." He studied her for another long moment, then swept past her toward the massive doors. His coat billowed behind him, and Kira caught the scent of something ancient and indefinable, old books and older stone, winter wind and something darkly spiced. He paused at the threshold, looking back at her with clear expectation. She hurried to follow. The passages beneath the city were a maze, but Valdimir moved through them with the confidence of someone who'd walked them for lifetimes. Kira struggled to keep up, her human eyes straining in the darkness while he navigated with ease. Twice she stumbled, and twice he was there instantly, his hand catching her elbow to steady her before she could fall. "Thank you," she murmured the second time. "I'm sorry. I can't see as well as you." He paused, seeming to consider this. Then he reached into his coat and withdrew a small silver device that emitted a soft light. He handed it to her, and she realized it was some kind of modernized lamp, elegant and clearly expensive. "You keep up with technology," she observed, surprised. He shrugged, a small movement of his shoulders that suggested of course he did. Just because he'd withdrawn from vampire society didn't mean he'd become primitive. They emerged from the underground passages into a basement. She recognized an abandoned building in lower Manhattan that had long been rumored to connect to the old courts. Valdimir moved to the stairs leading up, but Kira touched his arm before he could ascend. He turned to her, silver eyes questioning. "There will be sunlight up there," she said quietly. "In a few hours. I have a car, but we'll have to walk a block to reach it." Valdimir reached up and pulled a hood from his coat. She hadn't noticed it before, hidden in the dramatic collar. When he drew it up, it shadowed his face completely, the fabric seeming to drink in light rather than reflect it. Then he withdrew gloves from another pocket, drawing them on to cover his hands. Kira wondered how long it had been since he'd walked the streets above. Years? Decades? But he moved with determination, clearly having made his decision to help. The city was quiet at this hour, that strange, dead time between late night and early morning when even New York slept. Kira led him to her battered Honda, parked in a questionable spot that would probably earn her a ticket by morning. She didn't care. If Valdimir saved Emma, a parking ticket was nothing. He folded himself into the passenger seat with an expression of distinct distaste, clearly unaccustomed to modern vehicles. Kira bit back a smile as she started the engine. "The world has changed a lot," she offered, "since you withdrew." He turned those silver eyes on her, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. He made a gesture, spreading his hands, then bringing them close together. Then he shook his head. "The world has changed, but people haven't?" Kira guessed. A nod. Definite approval in his expression now. "Is that why you stopped speaking? Why you left?" His face shuddered immediately, becoming an unreadable mask. He turned to look out the window, watching the city slide past. Kira didn't push. She'd gotten more from him already than anyone had in centuries, and more importantly, he was coming to help Emma. Nothing else mattered. The safe house was actually a converted warehouse, its windows covered with UV blocking film. Lucian, the vampire who'd helped Kira find Valdimir, was waiting in the ground floor space that served as a common area. He looked up as she entered, then froze, his eyes going wide. "You actually found him," Lucian breathed. He was younger, as vampires went only 2 centuries old, with the dark coloring and sharp features common to those of Mediterranean descent. "You actually convinced the Vampire King to leave his throne room." Valdimir entered behind Kira, his presence filling the space like a thunderstorm fills the sky. Lucian immediately dropped into a bow so deep he nearly touched the floor. "Your Majesty," Lucian said, his voice shaking, "it is an honor beyond measure. We had heard rumors that you might have passed into final death or entered the deep sleep from which none wake. To see you here, walking among us again." Valdimir waved a hand, cutting off the speech. He pointed upward, clearly asking about Emma. "Third floor," Kira said quickly. "This way." She led him up the stairs, aware of Lucian following at a respectful distance. The room where Emma lay was small but clean, the bed positioned away from the window, despite the UV film. Another vampire, an ancient-looking woman named Isolde, sat beside the bed. She rose immediately when Valdimir entered, bowing as Lucian had, but Kira barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on her sister. Emma looked like a corpse. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor, stretched tight over her bones. Her breathing was shallow, labored. The veins in her neck and arms were black, visible through the translucent skin, and Kira could see them pulsing with each struggling heartbeat. Her brown hair, once glossy and thick, lay limp on the pillow. "She's gotten worse," Kira whispered, sinking down beside the bed. She took Emma's hand, careful of how fragile it felt. "Emma? Em, can you hear me? I found help." Emma's eyelids fluttered. When they opened, her eyes were no longer the warm brown Kira remembered. They were red-rimmed and bloodshot, the irises beginning to silver at the edges. She was caught between states, her body trying to complete a transformation it didn't have the power to finish. "Kira?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't be here. If Cassius finds out..." "Cassius can rot," Kira said fiercely. "I found someone who can help you." Valdimir approached the bed, and both Isolde and Lucian stepped back instinctively, making room. He knelt beside Emma with that same inhuman grace, his silver eyes studying her condition with an intensity that made Kira think of a doctor examining a patient. He reached out and touched Emma's forehead, his fingers gentle despite the clear power in his frame. Emma gasped, her back arching off the bed. For a moment Kira thought something had gone wrong, but then she saw her sister's expression. Not pain, but relief, as though Valdimir's touch had eased some terrible pressure. Valdimir drew back his hand and turned to Kira. He held up 2 fingers, then pointed to Emma. Then he made a gesture like breaking something in half. 2 choices? Kira guessed. You can help her, but there are 2 paths? A nod. He held up 1 finger, then made a motion like pushing something away, wiping it clean. Then he pointed to Emma's heart. You can remove the vampire blood, Kira said slowly. Make her fully human again. Another nod. Then he held up 2 fingers, touched his own chest, then Emma's, and made a gesture of completion. Or you can complete the turning with your blood. Make her a full vampire. A third nod, this one accompanied by an intense look that told her both options were truly available. He wasn't going to make the choice for them. Kira looked down at her sister. Emma? Did you hear that? You can be human again, or you can complete the transformation. But it has to be your choice. Emma's eyes cleared slightly, focusing on Valdimir with obvious awe. You're the one from the stories. The Silent King. Valdimir inclined his head slightly. If I become human again, Emma whispered, will I remember this, being stuck between? Valdimir nodded. And if I complete the turning, I'd be a vampire. Forever. Another nod. But then he did something that surprised Kira. He reached out and tapped Emma's forehead, then her heart, then made a gesture of growth, of continuation. His meaning was clear. Vampire or human, she would still be herself. Still be Emma. I want to be human, Emma said, tears sliding down her cheeks. I never wanted this. Cassius made me drink his blood without permission. He said it would be fun to watch me beg for more. I just want my life back. Kira felt rage surge through her at the casual cruelty Emma had endured. She looked up at Valdimir. Can you really remove it all, make her completely human again? He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded with absolute certainty. Then please, Kira said, save my sister. Valdimir turned back to Emma. He drew a small knife from his coat, silver and ancient, the handle carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Before anyone could react, he drew the blade across his palm. Blood welled up, dark red but somehow luminous, as though it contained its own light. He held his bleeding hand over Emma's mouth, letting drops of his blood fall onto her lips. Emma's eyes went wide, then rolled back in her head. Her body convulsed once, twice, and Kira grabbed her shoulders, holding her down. Is she okay? Kira demanded. What's happening? Lucian spoke from behind her, his voice filled with awe. His blood is fighting the other vampire's claim. It's so much more powerful that it's overwhelming the transformation, reversing it. Valdimir's expression was one of intense concentration. His other hand pressed against Emma's chest, over her heart. Kira could feel power radiating from him now, a cold force that made her teeth ache and her skin prickle. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds. Black liquid began to seep from Emma's pores, pushed out by Valdimir's blood. It smelled rotten, wrong. The vampire blood Cassius had given her being expelled from her system. The process took perhaps 5 minutes, though to Kira it felt like hours. Finally, Valdimir lifted his hand. The wound on his palm was already healing, the skin knitting together with supernatural speed. Emma lay still for a moment, then drew in a huge, gasping breath. Her eyes snapped open brown again, completely brown, no silver at the edges. Her skin was regaining color, the gray pallor fading to healthy pink. The black veins were gone. Oh my God, Emma breathed. I can think clearly. The hunger is gone. It's really gone. She burst into tears and Kira pulled her into a fierce embrace, her own eyes streaming. You're okay. You're going to be okay. Thank you, Emma sobbed, looking past Kira to Valdimir. Thank you so much. I thought I was going to die, or worse, become a monster. Valdimir's expression flickered at the word monster, something that might have been old pain crossing his features. But he nodded graciously, accepting her thanks. Isolde spoke up, her aged voice carrying authority. Your Majesty, you should know that Cassius will not be pleased. He's a member of the new court, and they protect their own. He'll see this as an insult. Valdimir turned to her, and his expression was colder than Kira had yet seen it. He made a single sharp gesture, a dismissive wave of his hand that conveyed utter contempt. "The king does not fear the new court," Lucian translated, though Kira had understood the gesture perfectly well. Isolde bowed. "Of course not, your majesty. Forgive my presumption." Valdimir looked at Kira then, and she felt the full weight of his attention settle on her like a cloak. He pointed to her, then to himself, then made a staying gesture. "You want me to stay with you?" Kira asked, confused. "Why?" He gestured to Emma, then to the window, then made a protective motion, hands spread wide, encompassing and guarding. "Because Cassius will come after us," Kira realized, cold fear settling in her stomach. "He'll want revenge for Emma being healed." A nod. Then Valdimir pointed firmly to himself, then to Kira and Emma both. His message was clear. "Under my protection." "Your Majesty is offering protection to humans," Lucian said wonderingly. "The first decree you've made in 300 years. Valdimir turned to him with one eyebrow raised, his expression clearly saying, "And it's just, the political implications are enormous," Lucian said carefully. "The new court claims jurisdiction over all vampire-human relations in New York. If you oppose them, if you declare protection over these sisters, it will be seen as a challenge to their authority." Valdimir's expression didn't change. He simply looked at Lucian until the younger vampire dropped his gaze. "Yes, your majesty," Lucian murmured. "I will spread word that the Sinclair sisters are under royal protection. None will dare touch them." "Wait," Kira said. "I don't understand. Why would you do this? You don't know us. You've been silent for centuries, and now you're getting involved in vampire politics for two human women you just met." Valdimir turned to her, and for the first time, something almost like a smile touched his lips. Not quite, his face was too unused to the expression, but close. He reached out and touched her cheek again, that same gentle gesture from the throne room. Then he pointed to his ears, then his eyes, then his heart. He'd heard her, seen her desperation, felt her love for her sister. "Because I begged," Kira whispered, "because I came to you when I had nowhere else to turn." He nodded. But there was something else in his expression, something deeper that Kira couldn't quite read. He looked at her as though she were a puzzle he was trying to solve, a mystery that had awakened something in him long dormant. "You should rest," Isolde said gently, addressing Emma. "The king's blood has healed you, but you'll be weak for a few days as your system fully adjusts back to being human." "I could sleep for a week," Emma admitted. She looked at Kira. "But what about you? If this Cassius is dangerous, I'll be fine," Kira said, with more confidence than she felt. She looked at Valdimir. "If your majesty is truly offering protection." He inclined his head regally. Then he gestured toward the door, clearly expecting her to follow. Kira kissed Emma's forehead. "Rest. I'll be back soon." "Be careful," Emma whispered. Kira followed Valdimir out of the room and down the stairs. In the common area, he paused, seeming to consider something. Then he turned to Lucian. The younger vampire straightened immediately. "Yes, your majesty?" Valdimir pointed to the door, then made a gathering motion with his hands. "You want me to call a meeting?" Lucian guessed. "Of whom?" Valdimir made a grand gesture, encompassing everything, then pointed downward toward the old underground passages. "The old court," Lucian breathed. "You want to reconvene the old court?" A nod. "Your majesty, most of them have been in deep sleep or scattered across the world. It could take weeks to gather them all." Valdimir held up 3 fingers. 3 days, Lucian said faintly. "You want them all here in 3 days." Another nod, this one brooking no argument. "It will be done," Lucian said, bowing. "I'll send messengers immediately." He paused. "May I tell them the reason for the gathering?" Valdimir's expression hardened. He made a gesture that clearly indicated challenge, authority, and correction. Then he pointed to where Emma rested above them. "You're going to formally challenge the new court's authority," Lucian said slowly, "because of what they allowed to happen to a human woman." Valdimir nodded once, sharp and final. Kira felt something shift in the air of the room, a subtle change in pressure that made her ears pop. Power was moving, ancient and terrible, waking from long slumber. "The vampire world is about to change," Isolde murmured. Valdimir turned to Kira and gestured toward the door again. This time she understood he wanted her to come back to his throne room with him, to the one place in all of New York that was absolutely secure. Okay, she said softly. I'll come with you. The journey back through the underground passages felt different now. Valdimir walked close enough that his coat occasionally brushed against her arm, a clear protective stance. When they reached his throne room, he gestured for her to enter first, following behind and pulling the massive doors shut. Kira stood in the center of the vast space, suddenly unsure. Now that Emma was safe, the adrenaline that had carried her this far was fading, leaving her exhausted and overwhelmed. The reality of the situation was sinking in. She was alone with the most powerful vampire in North America, possibly the world. A vampire who hadn't spoken in 300 years, who'd just upended the entire political structure of the local vampire court for her sake. Valdimir moved past her to a doorway she hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind one of the carved columns. He looked back at her, clearly expecting her to follow. The passage led to a chamber that made Kira's breath catch. It was a library, vast and beautiful, with shelves that rose 3 stories high. Books filled every available space, some of them clearly ancient beyond measure. There were comfortable chairs, reading lamps, modern, she noted, and a fireplace that currently held only cold ashes. With a gesture, Valdimir brought the fireplace to life. Flames erupted from nothing, casting warm light through the room. He turned to her and pointed to a chair, then to himself, then made a questioning gesture. "You want to know about me?" Kira guessed. "Why I was willing to risk my life for Emma?" A nod. He settled into a chair across from her with that inhuman grace, his silver eyes fixed on her face. Kira sank into her own chair, suddenly boneless with exhaustion. "Emma is all the family I have left. Our parents died when I was 21 and she was 16. Car accident. I became her legal guardian, worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. She was supposed to go to college, become something more than I ever could." Her voice hardened. Then she met Cassius at a party. He seemed charming, sophisticated. She didn't know what he was until it was too late. Valdimir's expression darkened at Cassius's name. "I would do anything for her," Kira continued. "She's the only person in this world who matters to me. So when I heard rumors that there was someone old enough and powerful enough to save her, I didn't care how dangerous it was to find you. I had to try." Valdimir leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather journal and a pen. He opened the journal to a blank page and wrote something, then turned it to show her. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned. It read, "You are not afraid of me." "I was terrified," Kira admitted, "but fear doesn't matter when someone you love is dying." He wrote again. "Others have come seeking favors, all reeked of fear. You reeked of love." Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Is that why you helped? Because I smelled less afraid?" His lips quirked, that almost smile again. He wrote, "Because you reminded me of something I thought I'd forgotten, that there is still courage in the world, still love worth protecting." "Why did you stop speaking?" Kira asked softly. "What happened to you?" His expression shuddered immediately. He closed the journal, tucking it back into his coat. "I'm sorry," Kira said quickly. "I shouldn't have pried. It's none of my business." But Valdimir shook his head slowly. He seemed to be having an internal debate, his perfect features showing a conflict of emotions she hadn't expected him capable of. Finally, he retrieved the journal again. He wrote for longer this time, his handwriting filling the page. When he turned it to her, Kira read, 300 years ago, I spoke a curse in anger. Words that brought about the death of someone I cared for. When I realized what I had done, I tried to take back the words, but it was too late. I swore an oath that I would never speak again, never let my voice cause such harm. The curse sealed my vow. I cannot break it even if I wanted to. The words are locked inside me." Kira's heart ached reading this. "You've been silent for 300 years because of one mistake?" He nodded, and the pain in his silver eyes was ancient and profound. "That's," Kira struggled for words, "that's a terrible burden to carry. I'm sorry. No one deserves that kind of punishment, especially self-inflicted." Valdimir stared at her as though she'd said something shocking. His hand lifted, reaching toward her face, then hesitated in the air between them, asking permission. Kira leaned forward, closing the distance. His fingers touched her cheek again, cold but gentle, and this time they lingered. He was looking at her as though she were something precious and unexpected, a flower blooming in winter. A loud crash from somewhere above shattered the moment. Valdimir was on his feet instantly, his entire demeanor shifting from contemplative to lethal. He positioned himself between Kira and the library entrance, his body coiled with predatory readiness. Lucian's voice echoed through the passages. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but Cassius is here with members of the new court. They're demanding to speak with you." Valdimir's eyes flashed with cold fury. He gestured sharply for Kira to stay in the library, then moved toward the entrance with deadly purpose. "Wait," Kira said, grabbing his arm without thinking. His skin was ice-cold through the fabric of his coat. "Don't do anything rash. I don't want you starting a war because of me and Emma." He turned back to her, and his expression softened marginally. He touched her face once more, then gently removed her hand from his arm. His meaning was clear. "Stay here. Stay safe. Trust me." Then he was gone, moving through the passages with supernatural speed. Kira counted to 10, then followed. There was no way she was staying behind while others fought her battles. By the time she reached the throne room, Valdimir was already seated on his obsidian throne, looking every inch the ancient king he was. Lucian stood to his right, and several other vampires Kira didn't recognize flanked the room members of the old court, she guessed, who'd been in the city and responded quickly to the summons. Facing them were 5 vampires who looked younger, more modern in their dress and bearing. The one in front was handsome in an aggressive way, with dark hair and eyes that had probably been blue before his turning. He wore an expensive suit and an expression of sneering arrogance. Cassius. "So the rumors are true," Cassius said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "The silent king has finally emerged from his tomb. Tell me, Your Majesty, do you remember how to rule? Or have 3 centuries of sulking made you forget?" The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Several of the old court vampires hissed, clearly offended on Valdimir's behalf. But Valdimir himself didn't react beyond a slight narrowing of his eyes. "Have a care, Cassius," Lucian said coldly. "You address the oldest of us, the one who was ancient when your sire's sire was still human. And yet he cowers underground while we run this city," Cassius shot back. He looked at the throne with naked contempt. "The new court has built something real. We have power, wealth, influence in the human world. What do you have, old king? Dust and memories?" Valdimir stood slowly, and the simple motion silenced every voice in the room. He descended from his throne with that predatory grace, walking toward Cassius with deliberate steps. The younger vampire held his ground, but Kira could see fear beginning to creep into his expression. Valdimir stopped directly in front of Cassius. They were nearly the same height, but the difference in presence was staggering. Valdimir radiated power like the sun radiates heat, constant, overwhelming, undeniable. He pointed at Cassius, then at Emma upstairs, then made a gesture of violation, of assault. "You want to know what he's saying?" Kira spoke up, unable to stay silent any longer. She stepped forward into the throne room, ignoring Lucian's horrified expression. "He's saying you're a coward who attacks defenseless humans for entertainment." Cassius's eyes locked onto her, and his expression twisted into something ugly. "The little human who's been causing so much trouble. I should have killed you when I had the chance." "You came to my apartment?" Kira demanded. 3 times, Cassius said with a cruel smile. "But you were never home, always running around, chasing rumors of how to save your pathetic sister. Did you really think I'd let you undo my fun?" Valdimir moved then. One moment he was standing still, the next his hand was wrapped around Cassius's throat, lifting the younger vampire off his feet. Valdimir's silver eyes blazed with fury, and for the first time, Kira saw true fear in Cassius's face. Valdimir slammed Cassius against the stone wall hard enough to crack the rock. His free hand came up, one finger pointing at Cassius's face, then making a sharp braking motion. "The king says you will answer for your crimes," Lucian translated, his voice shaking. "Against the human woman, Emma, against her sister, against the old laws that forbid forcing a turning on an unwilling human." "Those laws are obsolete," one of the new court vampires protested. "The old ways are dead." Valdimir dropped Cassius and turned to the speaker. His expression was arctic. He raised his hand and made a complicated gesture drawing in the air, showing layers, hierarchy, age, and power and authority earned through millennia. The laws are not obsolete, Isolde spoke from the entrance, her ancient voice carrying weight. They are the foundation of our society. They are what separate us from monsters. The new court has forgotten this in its arrogance. More vampires were arriving now, filing into the throne room. Kira recognized some from the safe house, but others were completely unfamiliar vampires from other parts of the city, drawn by news of the king's emergence. Within minutes, the room was full of witnesses. Valdimir surveyed them all, then looked at Lucian. He made a series of gestures, and Lucian's expression grew grave. His Majesty calls for formal trial, Lucian announced, for Cassius of the new court on charges of violating the law of consent, of forcing blood upon a human woman against her will, of leaving her to suffer a half-transformation that would have killed her slowly and painfully. This is absurd, Cassius snarled, pushing himself off the wall. The new court won't stand for this. We outnumber the old court 3-1. Valdimir held up one hand, palm out. Then he began to glow. Kira had to shield her eyes. Power poured off him in waves, visible as silver light that filled the throne room. It was cold as deepest winter, old as mountains, terrifying and beautiful at once. Every vampire in the room fell to their knees, including the members of the new court. They couldn't help themselves. The weight of Valdimir's age and power was simply too immense to resist. The light faded, and Valdimir stood alone on his feet, surveying the kneeling vampires with an expression of grim satisfaction. He pointed to Cassius, then to himself, then made a gesture of judgment. "The king will render judgment personally," Lucian gasped out, still on his knees, "as is his right as oldest and most powerful." Valdimir turned and walked back to his throne. He didn't sit, instead standing before it and gesturing for everyone to rise. When they did, he began to make a series of signs and gestures, and Lucian translated. 300 years ago, I withdrew from our society because I could no longer bear to watch the casual cruelty, the thoughtless destruction of human lives. I believed that without my interference, vampires would learn to police themselves, to find their own way to justice and honor. Valdimir's expression hardened. Instead, I find that things have grown worse. The new court treats humans as playthings, violates the oldest laws with impunity, and claims that might makes right. His gestures became sharper, more emphatic. This ends tonight. The old court is reconvened, the old laws are reaffirmed, and Cassius will serve as an example of what happens to those who violate them. Cassius tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Valdimir was there, moving faster than Kira's eyes could follow. The vampire king grabbed Cassius by the back of the neck and forced him down to his knees. Valdimir looked out at the assembled vampires, and his next gesture was unmistakable. Justice. "For the crime of forced turning," Lucian translated, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. "The punishment is death." "No!" Cassius shrieked. "You can't! The new court will never accept this!" Valdimir's eyes blazed silver. He released Cassius's neck and stepped back, giving him room. Then he made a gesture that was clearly a challenge. "Fight me." Cassius looked around wildly, seeing no help coming from his fellows. The other new court vampires wouldn't meet his eyes, clearly unwilling to oppose Valdimir on his behalf. Finally, Cassius snarled and launched himself at the vampire king in a desperate attack. The fight lasted perhaps 10 seconds. Cassius was fast and strong by normal vampire standards, but Valdimir was something else entirely. He moved like water, like shadow, always exactly where he needed to be to avoid strikes and deliver his own. His movements were economical, precise, beautiful in a terrible way. When it ended, Cassius was on the ground, Valdimir's hand through his chest gripping his heart. The younger vampire's eyes were wide with terror. Valdimir looked down at him without mercy. Then, he made one final gesture with his free hand. Justice served. He crushed Cassius's heart. The vampire's body disintegrated rapidly, crumbling to ash within seconds. Valdimir stepped back, brushing the dust from his hands with distaste. The throne room was utterly silent. Valdimir turned to face the assembled vampires. He drew himself up to his full height and made a proclamation in gestures that needed no translation. He was claiming authority, declaring the old court restored, making it clear that any who violated the old laws would face the same fate as Cassius. One by one, the vampires in the room bowed. Even the members of the new court, faced with undeniable power and righteous fury, bent their necks in submission. "Long live the Vampire King," Isolde said, her old voice carrying to every corner. "Long live the king," the others echoed. Valdimir accepted their obeisance with a nod, then his eyes found Kira. His expression immediately softened from judgment to concern. He crossed to her in 3 quick strides, reaching out to touch her face, checking that she was unharmed. "I'm okay," Kira said quietly, though her heart was racing from what she'd just witnessed. "You moved so fast, he never had a chance," Valdimir's expression said. "That was the point. You didn't have to kill him because of Emma and me," Kira said. "We're not worth starting a war over." He gripped her shoulders gently but firmly, his silver eyes intense. Then he made a gesture that encompassed her, Emma, every human in the city. His meaning was clear. You are worth protecting. All humans are worth protecting. "The king has spoken his will through actions," Lucian said, approaching carefully. "The new court will fall in line or face judgment. His Majesty's authority is absolute." Valdimir released Kira's shoulders and turned to Lucian. He made several gestures, and Lucian nodded. "His Majesty wishes to establish a new law," Lucian announced to the room. "Any vampire who forces blood upon an unwilling human will face trial and likely execution. Any vampire who harms a human under royal protection will face the king's personal judgment, and the Sinclair sisters are the first to be granted such protection." A murmur ran through the gathered vampires, but no one protested. They'd seen what happened to those who opposed the king's will. Valdimir made one more gesture, a dismissal, and the vampires began to file out. Within minutes, only Lucian, Isolde, and Kira remained. "Your Majesty," Isolde said carefully, "your emergence will send shockwaves through the vampire world. There will be challenges to your authority from other regions, other kings and queens who have claimed territory in your absence." Valdimir's expression said he was prepared for that. "And the human," Isolde continued, glancing at Kira. "Your protection of her is being noticed. There are those who will see her as a weakness to exploit." Valdimir's face hardened immediately. He made a sharp gesture. "Let them try." "Perhaps Miss Sinclair should remain here," Lucian suggested, "in your throne room, where she's completely safe, at least until the situation stabilizes." "I can't stay here forever," Kira protested. "I have a job, a life, and Emma needs me." Valdimir looked at her for a long moment, conflict clear in his expression. Then he made a resigned gesture and turned to Lucian, signing something complex. "His Majesty says your sister will be brought here as well, once she's strong enough to move," Lucian translated. "Both of you will remain under his protection until he's certain you're safe. He apologizes for the inconvenience, but says your safety is worth more than your temporary freedom." Kira wanted to argue, but the look in Valdimir's eyes stopped her. He was genuinely worried about her. This ancient, powerful king who'd killed a man minutes ago was scared that something might happen to her. "Okay," she said softly. "Emma and I will stay. For now." Relief flooded his features. He reached out and took her hand, his cold fingers threading through her warm ones. The gesture was almost shy, uncertain, as though he hadn't held someone's hand in centuries and had forgotten how. "We'll make arrangements," Isolde said, bowing. "The king's chambers haven't been used in 300 years, but they can be prepared quickly." She and Lucian withdrew, leaving Kira alone with Valdimir in the vast throne room. He still held her hand, looking down at their joined fingers as though they were something miraculous. "Thank you," Kira said quietly, "for saving Emma, for protecting us. You didn't have to do any of this." He looked up at her, and his expression was surprisingly vulnerable. He pointed to her, then to his chest, then made a gesture she was beginning to recognize. "You make me feel something I thought was lost." "What did you lose?" Kira asked, "when you stopped speaking?" He led her back through the passages to the library, settling them both in the chairs by the fire. He retrieved his journal and began to write, pages and pages this time, as though something had broken open inside him. When he handed it to her, Kira read, "Her name was Seraphina. She was human, a scholar who studied our kind without fear. I grew to care for her deeply, though I knew our time together would be brief by immortal standards. One night, she asked me to turn her, to make her vampire so we could have centuries instead of decades together. I refused. I told her she didn't understand what she was asking, what she would lose. We argued. I said terrible things in my anger, things I didn't mean. I told her that humans who became vampires lost their souls, that she would become a monster, that I would rather watch her die than turn her into something I could no longer love. She left in tears. I meant to follow, to apologize, but I was too proud, too certain that she would return once she calmed down. She never did. She was found 3 days later, killed by another vampire who'd heard about the human who knew too much about our kind. If I had turned her, she would have been strong enough to defend herself. If I had apologized immediately, she would have been with me, under my protection. My words killed her as surely as if I'd torn out her heart myself. So I swore I would never speak again, never let my voice cause harm. The curse sealed my vow, made it permanent, and I withdrew from the world, unable to bear the thought of watching anyone else suffer because of me. Kira's eyes were streaming by the time she finished reading. She set the journal aside and reached for Valdimir's hand. That wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known what would happen. He shook his head vehemently, clearly disagreeing. You loved her, Kira said, and you had an argument like people who love each other sometimes do. But you didn't kill her. Another vampire did. And you've been punishing yourself for 300 years for being human, for having human emotions and making human mistakes, even though you're not human anymore. Valdimir stared at her, and she could see the war of emotions in his face, pain, guilt, and underneath it all, a desperate need to believe what she was saying. Serafina wouldn't want this for you, Kira continued gently. If she loved you, she wouldn't want you to lock yourself away in silence for centuries. She'd want you to live, to speak, to be the person you were. He pulled his hand from hers and stood abruptly, turning away. His shoulders were rigid, his entire body tense. Kira realized she'd pushed too far, too fast. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have said that. It's not my place to tell you how to grieve. But Valdimir was moving to the far side of the library, to a section of shelves she hadn't noticed before. He pulled out a small wooden box, ornately carved, and brought it back to her. Inside was a portrait, painted on ivory in exquisite detail. The woman in the portrait was beautiful, with dark hair and kind eyes. She was smiling, her expression full of intelligence and warmth. At the bottom was inscribed, Serafina Blackwell, 1697-1724. She was lovely, Kira said softly. Valdimir nodded, touching the portrait with infinite gentleness. Then he pointed to it, then to Kira, then made a gesture of similarity. You think I'm like her? Kira guessed. He nodded, not in appearance, his gestures clarified, but in courage, in kindness, in the way she'd walked into his throne room without knowing if he'd kill her or help her. I think you see what you want to see, Kira said gently. I'm not special. I'm just someone who loves her sister. Valdimir's expression said that was exactly what made her special. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly. Kira felt exhaustion pulling at her, the events of the last few days finally catching up. Her eyes were starting to close despite her best efforts. When she woke, she was lying on an incredibly soft bed in a room she didn't recognize. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was Emma? What had happened? But then memory returned. The throne room. The library. Falling asleep by the fire, Valdimir must have carried her to a bedroom. The thought made heat rise in her cheeks. The room was beautiful, all dark wood and deep colors, clearly part of the underground palace. A wardrobe stood against one wall, and when Kira investigated, she found it full of clothes in her size. Modern clothes, casual and comfortable. Someone had been shopping, and a knock on the door made her jump. Come in? Lucian entered, carrying a tray of food. Good evening, Miss Sinclair. I trust you slept well? What time is it? Nearly 8 in the evening. You slept for about 16 hours. He set the tray on a small table. The king asked me to check on you when you woke. He's been quite concerned. Kira felt that flutter in her chest again. Where is he? In the throne room, holding court. Several matters require his attention now that he's officially resumed ruling. Lucian smiled. He's been distracted, though. He keeps looking toward the passages that lead here. How's Emma? Your sister is here, actually. She arrived an hour ago, much stronger now. She's been given rooms near yours. Lucian's expression grew serious. "Miss Sinclair, I hope you understand the significance of what His Majesty has done for you. He hasn't shown interest in anyone or anything for 3 centuries, and now he emerges from isolation, kills a vampire of the new court, and declares protection over 2 human women. You've changed everything." "I didn't mean to," Kira said helplessly. "I know. That's what makes it remarkable." Lucian moved toward the door. "Eat. Refresh yourself. Then perhaps you'd like to see the throne room. His Majesty would be pleased to have you there." After Lucian left, Kira ate mechanically, her mind racing. What was she doing? Getting involved with a vampire, especially one as ancient and powerful as Valdimir, was insane. They were from completely different worlds. He was immortal, she was human. He couldn't even speak to her except through gestures and written words. But when she thought of those silver eyes looking at her with such vulnerability, such desperate hope, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. She found Emma's room and knocked. Her sister opened the door immediately, looking better than Kira had seen her in months. The color was fully back in her face, and her eyes were clear and bright. "Kira!" Emma pulled her into a fierce hug. "This place is incredible, and that vampire king, and he's terrifying, but also kind of amazing." "He saved your life," Kira said. "I know. I don't know how I can ever repay him." Emma pulled back, studying her sister's face. "But I think maybe you're already doing that." "What do you mean?" "Lucian told me that the king hasn't been interested in anything for hundreds of years, until you showed up and reminded him there were still things worth caring about." Emma grinned. "My sister, catching the attention of vampire royalty. Who would have thought?" "It's not like that," Kira protested, but even to her own ears the denial sounded weak. "Kira, he looks at you like you hung the moon. I saw him earlier before you woke up. He was standing outside your door like a guard, making sure nothing disturbed you." Emma's expression softened. "When's the last time someone cared about you like that?" "Never," Kira admitted quietly. "Then maybe you should stop overthinking this and just see where it goes." But as Kira made her way to the throne room, she couldn't shake her doubts. What future could she possibly have with someone who'd already lived for millennia? She'd age and die while he remained eternally young. Unless... No. She couldn't think about that. Becoming a vampire was a choice she'd never seriously considered. It meant giving up the sun, accepting an endless diet of blood, watching everyone she knew grow old and die while she remained frozen in time. The throne room was full when she arrived. Dozens of vampires stood in groups discussing matters of law and territory. Valdimir sat on his throne, listening to a dispute between 2 older vampires. He looked regal and remote, every inch the ancient king. Then he saw her. His expression transformed immediately, coldness melting into warmth. He held up one hand, pausing the vampires mid-argument, and stood. Every eye in the room turned to Kira as Valdimir descended from his throne and crossed to her. He stopped in front of her and touched her face, his cold fingers gentle against her warm skin. "Are you well?" his eyes asked. "I'm fine," Kira said quietly, very aware of all the watching vampires. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Valdimir made a dismissive gesture, clearly indicating that she could never be an interruption. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Kira took it. He led her back to the throne and, to her surprise, produced a second chair, smaller but still elegant, and placed it beside his. "Is that appropriate?" Kira whispered. His expression said he didn't care. He was the king. He made the rules. So Kira sat beside the vampire king while he held court and tried not to think about how natural it felt. The evening passed in a blur of vampire politics. Disputes were settled, territories negotiated, laws clarified. Through it all, Valdimir communicated primarily through gestures, with Lucian or Isolde translating when necessary. But Kira noticed that she was beginning to understand him without translation, reading his expressions and movements as though they spoke a private language. When the last petitioner had been heard and the throne room finally cleared, Valdimir turned to her. He made a gesture. "Walk with me." They strolled through the underground passages, and Kira was struck by the beauty hidden beneath the city. These weren't just tunnels, they were works of art, carved stone, elegant archways, chambers that served as galleries for paintings and sculpture. How long have you lived here? Kira asked. Valdimir held up 5 fingers, then made a gesture indicating centuries. 500 years in this space specifically? A nod. Were you alone all that time? His expression flickered with old pain. He nodded again. That's so lonely, Kira said softly. He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. His silver eyes searched her face, and then he did something that stole her breath. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed his forehead against hers. The gesture was intimate, but not sexual. It spoke of connection, of trust, of needing to be close to someone after centuries of isolation. Kira closed her eyes and let herself feel the coolness of his skin, the steadiness of his presence. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted in a whisper. This is all so far beyond my understanding. You're a vampire king who's lived for millennia, and I'm just a human bartender who can barely pay rent. What could you possibly want with someone like me? Valdimir pulled back enough to look at her. Then he touched her chest, over her heart, and his expression was achingly vulnerable. You make me feel alive again, his eyes said. You make me remember why I loved this world enough to become its king. But I'm going to die, Kira said, tears pricking her eyes. In 60 years, if I'm lucky, I'll be old and gone, and you'll still be here, eternal and unchanged. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. He held her gaze and shook his head firmly. Then he pointed to her heart again, to his own, and made a gesture of binding, of permanence. You can't promise that, Kira said. You can't stop time. But Valdimir's expression said there were other solutions. His meaning was clear even without words. You'd turn me? Kira whispered. Make me like you? He nodded slowly, but then he made another gesture, showing her a choice, an open door. Only if you wanted, his expression said. Only if you chose it freely. I don't know if I could. Give up the sun, live on blood, become something not human anymore. Valdimir touched her face again, and his eyes were infinitely gentle. You would still be you, his expression said, still be Kira, just more, stronger, safer. I need time, Kira said, to think about all this, to understand what I'd be choosing. He nodded immediately, stepping back to give her space. Of course. Take all the time you need. They walked back to the residential section in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet now. When they reached Kira's door, Valdimir took her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles in a gesture that was courtly and old-fashioned and utterly charming. Sleep well, his eyes said. You too, Kira said, then felt foolish. Did vampires sleep? She actually wasn't sure. His lips quirked with amusement, and he made a gesture indicating sometimes when we choose to. After he left, Kira lay in bed and stared at the carved ceiling, her mind spinning. Everything had changed so fast. A week ago, her biggest worry had been whether Emma would survive. Now her sister was safe, but Kira herself was standing at a crossroads that would determine the entire course of her life. Could she really become a vampire? Give up everything human about herself to be with Valdimir? The more important question, she realized, was did she want to be with him? Setting aside all the complications, all the logical reasons it would never work, did her heart want this? Yes, she admitted to herself in the darkness. Yes, it did. The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Emma grew stronger, beginning to explore the underground palace and make friends among the friendlier vampires. Kira spent her days reading in the library and her evenings watching Valdimir hold court, learning the intricacies of vampire politics and law. And slowly, carefully, she and Valdimir grew closer. He taught her to read his gestures more fluently, until they could have complex conversations without needing a translator. She told him stories about her life, her childhood with Emma, her parents, her dreams that had been put on hold when she became a guardian at 21. He showed her his collections, not just books, but art and music and artifacts from throughout human history. He had been there for so much of it, and through his gestures and occasional writing, he shared those memories with her. One evening, as they sat together in the library, Kira asked the question that had been bothering her. Why haven't you tried to break your curse? In 300 years, surely there must have been some way to undo it. Valdimir's expression grew complicated. He retrieved his journal and wrote, I didn't want to break it. The curse was my punishment, self-inflicted and deserved. I thought if I suffered enough, if I denied myself the power of speech forever, it might somehow balance the scales for what I'd done to Serafina. But that's not how it works, Kira said gently. Suffering doesn't bring her back. It doesn't undo anything. It just means you've both lost. She lost her life, and you lost your voice and your connection to the world. He stared at the words he'd written, his jaw tight. Do you want to break the curse? Kira asked. If you could, would you want to speak again? Valdimir looked at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. Then let's figure out how, Kira said. Between your knowledge and all these books and the vampires who've gathered here, someone must know something about curse breaking. Valdimir's expression was doubtful, but he didn't refuse. They spent the next several hours researching, pulling books from shelves and poring over ancient texts. Isolde joined them, offering her knowledge, and gradually other vampires contributed what they knew. The picture that emerged was complicated. Valdimir's curse was self-inflicted, powered by his own enormous magical reserves and bound to an oath. The only way to break it was either to fulfill the conditions of the oath, which was impossible, since he'd sworn never to speak again or to have someone else speak words powerful enough to counter his own. But who has that kind of power? Kira asked. If you're the oldest and strongest, how could anyone else's words override yours? There is one possibility, Isolde said carefully. A curse bound by grief can be broken by love. If someone loved him enough, truly and completely, their words of release might be strong enough to counter his oath. Kira's heart began to pound. What would they need to say? The counter to his oath. He swore never to speak again. Someone who loves him would need to ask him to speak, to give him permission to break his vow, to tell him he's suffered enough. And that would work? It might, Isolde said, if the love was real. If the words came from the heart. Love is the oldest magic after all. Valdimir was shaking his head firmly. He gestured. No, I won't ask someone to do that. Why not? Kira demanded. He wrote quickly, because if it doesn't work, if the curse holds, it would be crushing. Better to accept silence than to hope and fail. What if I want to try? Kira said quietly. Valdimir's head snapped up, his silver eyes wide. I can't promise it will work, Kira continued. I can't promise my feelings are strong enough or my words powerful enough, but if there's even a chance it might free you, don't you think it's worth trying? Miss Sinclair, Isolde said gently, you must understand what you're saying. To attempt this, you must speak from a place of true love, not affection, not gratitude, but deep, real love. Do you feel that for His Majesty? Kira looked at Valdimir, at his beautiful, immortal face that showed every emotion so clearly despite his inability to speak, at the hope and fear warring in his expression, at the way he held himself so carefully as though trying not to influence her decision. Yes, she said simply. I love him. The words hung in the air between them. Valdimir looked stunned, his eyes wide and bright. He reached for her hands, gripping them tightly. I don't know when it happened, Kira continued, speaking to him now. Maybe when you agreed to help Emma without asking for anything in return. Maybe when you held court, and I saw how much you care about justice and protecting the vulnerable. Maybe in these quiet moments in the library, learning to speak without words. She smiled, tears starting to fall. But I love you. I love your strength and your gentleness, your pain and your hope. I love who you are, Valdimir. He was trembling, she realized. This ancient, powerful king was shaking with emotion. So let me try, Kira said. Let me try to give you back your voice, please. Valdimir closed his eyes, clearly struggling with himself. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Isolde stepped back. I'll give you privacy. After she left, Kira and Valdimir sat facing each other. He looked terrified, she realized, more afraid than he'd been facing down the new court or executing Cassius. I'm not sure what to say, Kira admitted. The words need to be right. Valdimir squeezed her hands, encouraging her. Kira took a deep breath, centering herself. Then she began to speak, letting her heart guide her words. Valdimir Noctis, Vampire King, Ancient One, I release you from your oath. The curse you spoke in grief, I counter with love. The silence you embraced as punishment, I ask you to break as a gift. You have suffered enough. You have atoned enough. You have been alone enough. Power began to gather in the room, a tangible pressure that made Kira's ears pop. Valdimir's eyes flew open, silver light blazing from them. "I ask you to speak," Kira continued, her voice growing stronger. "Not because you must, but because you can. Not from obligation, but from choice. I ask you to share your voice with me, to let me hear the words you've kept locked inside for 3 centuries. I ask this not as a command, but as a request from someone who loves you completely." The light around Valdimir intensified, painful to look at directly. The air hummed with magic, old and powerful. Kira felt tears streaming down her face, but kept speaking. "Break your curse, Valdimir, for Serafina, who wouldn't want you to suffer, for yourself, who deserves peace, and for me, because I would love to hear your voice saying my name." The power crescendoed, building to an almost unbearable level, and then shattered. The sound was like glass breaking, audible and definitive. The light vanished instantly, leaving the library dim and quiet. Valdimir sat frozen, his expression shocked. Then he drew in a breath. His mouth opened, and for the first time in 300 years, the Vampire King spoke. "Kira." His voice was beautiful, deep and rich, with an accent that spoke of centuries and countless languages. It cracked slightly on her name, rusty from disuse, but it was real. He was speaking. "Oh my God," Kira whispered. "It worked. It actually worked." "You broke my curse," Valdimir said wonderingly. Each word seemed to cost him effort, as though he was relearning how to form sounds. 300 years of silence, and you shattered it in minutes. "How do you feel?" He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "Terrified, amazed, free." His silver eyes met hers, blazing with emotion. "You love me." "I do," Kira said. "I don't deserve you," Valdimir said. "I'm a monster who's lived too long and done terrible things. I've killed. I've ruled with cruelty when I thought it necessary. I withdrew from the world because I couldn't bear my own guilt. You should run from me, not love me." "Too late," Kira said. "I've already decided." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his cold chest. "I love you," he said into her hair, each word careful and deliberate. "I have loved you since you walked into my throne room with fear and courage in equal measure, since you bargained with your own life for your sisters, since you looked at me and saw not a monster or a king, but simply someone who was lonely and hurting." Kira tilted her head back to look at him. "Say my name again." "Kira," he whispered, and then he was kissing her. It was cold, but not unpleasantly so, like jumping into cool water on a hot day. His lips were gentle at first, tentative, but when she responded, the kiss deepened. 300 years of touch starvation and isolation poured into that kiss, along with desperate love and overwhelming relief. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Valdimir rested his forehead against hers. "I can speak again," he said, wonder in his voice. "After all this time. Because you loved me enough." "What happens now?" Kira asked. "Now?" Valdimir pulled back enough to look at her properly. "Now I court you properly. I speak to you in words instead of gestures. I tell you all the things I've wanted to say. And eventually, if you choose it, I offer you eternity. You want me to become a vampire." "I want you to make the choice freely," Valdimir corrected, "without pressure or desperation. I will love you whether you choose immortality or mortality. But if you choose to remain human, know that I will be at your side until the very end, and I will mourn you for the rest of existence." Kira thought about the implications: endless life, endless night, endless blood. But also endless time with Valdimir, endless opportunity to see and learn and experience. A chance to be truly equal to him rather than a fragile human under his protection. "Ask me again in a month," she said. "When the crisis has passed and everything is settled, let me make the choice with a clear head." "Of course," Valdimir said immediately, "though I hope you know that I will support whatever you decide." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a declaration. The next weeks transformed the vampire underground. With Valdimir actively ruling again and his curse broken, he could speak directly to his subjects, issue decrees, and negotiate with other vampire leaders. The new court fell into line quickly, recognizing they had no chance against the ancient king now that he was fully engaged. Kira watched it all with fascination, seeing the political landscape shift around them. Valdimir was a good ruler, she realized, stern when necessary but fair, willing to listen and adapt. He'd learned from his centuries of observation, understood the complexities of modern life in a way that balanced with his ancient wisdom. Emma chose to return to the human world after several weeks. She was fully recovered, grateful to be alive and human, and eager to restart her life. Valdimir provided security for her, a team of loyal vampires who would ensure no one ever threatened her again, and helped her find a scholarship for college. "You're staying, aren't you?" Emma asked Kira the night before she left. "With him. Is that okay?" "Kira, you literally broke a 300-year-old curse with the power of love. You're living in a fairy tale." "Of course it's okay." Emma hugged her tightly. "Just promise you'll visit and call. Even if you choose to become a vampire, don't forget about your very mortal little sister." "Never," Kira promised. A month after the curse broke, on a night when the moon was full and the underground palace glowed with silver light, Valdimir took Kira back to the library where so much had changed. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice still carrying that note of wonder every time he spoke. "Though I already know your answer, I think." "Do you?" "You've been reading the texts about vampirism," Valdimir said, asking Isolde and Lucian detailed questions about the transformation process. "You've been preparing." Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Was I that obvious? To someone who's been watching you constantly?" "Yes." He pulled her down to sit beside him. "Kira Sinclair, will you accept my blood? Will you become vampire, my partner in all things, my equal rather than my protected charge? Will you share eternity with me?" Kira had known this question was coming. She'd thought about it constantly, examining her feelings from every angle. The truth was, she couldn't imagine walking away from Valdimir now, couldn't picture growing old while he remained young, dying while he continued for centuries more. And beyond that, she'd developed a taste for this hidden world of immortals and ancient politics. "Yes," she said simply. "I want this, I want you, I want forever." Relief and joy flooded Valdimir's features. "You're certain? Once it's done, there's no going back." "I'm certain." He kissed her deeply, then pulled back. "The transformation will take 3 days, 3 exchanges of blood, and then a death and rebirth. I'll be with you the entire time." "I trust you. Then let's begin." The first exchange happened that night. Valdimir made a small cut on his wrist, and Kira drank his blood. It tasted of winter and power, cold sliding down her throat. Almost immediately she felt Change's strength flooding her limbs, her senses sharpening. The second exchange came the next night. This time, Valdimir drank from her first, his fangs piercing her throat in a moment of sharp pain that faded to pleasure. Then she drank from him again, and the world became hyper-real. She could hear heartbeats from chambers away, smell the subtle differences between vampires, see in perfect clarity despite the dim light. The third exchange was on the final night. Kira felt fever burning through her, her body beginning the transformation. Valdimir held her as she drank from his wrist, his other hand stroking her hair. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured, "so strong, so brave." When she'd taken enough blood, he laid her on the bed they'd prepared. "Now comes the difficult part. Your heart will stop. You'll die in a sense, but you'll wake again as something more." "Will it hurt?" "Yes," he said honestly, "but I'll be here when you wake, I promise." Kira felt her heartbeat beginning to slow, stuttering. Her vision blurred. Valdimir's face above her was the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her. She dreamed of flying through an endless night sky, of power coursing through her veins, of drinking moonlight and starlight. She dreamed of Valdimir's voice speaking her name, calling her back. When she woke, everything was different. The world was sharper, clearer, more vibrant. She could hear the blood moving through Valdimir's veins despite his heart not beating. Could smell the ancient stone of the chamber, the dust on books in the library beyond, the lingering scent of humans somewhere far above. Her body felt strong and light, capable of incredible things. And she was hungry. "Easy," Valdimir said, appearing instantly beside the bed. "I know you can smell it. The hunger is overwhelming at first, but I've prepared for this." He offered her a glass filled with blood, human blood, warm and fresh. Kira took it with trembling hands and drank. It was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted, satisfying a craving she hadn't known how to name. When the glass was empty, her mind cleared further. She looked at Valdimir and gasped. He'd always been beautiful, but now she could see the power radiating from him like light, the sheer age and strength that made him what he was. "You're stunning," she breathed. He laughed. I'm exactly as I was. You're simply seeing me as vampires do now. He touched her face gently. How do you feel? Amazing. Powerful. Alive, which is ironic. Kira stood, and the movement was effortless, graceful in a way she'd never been as a human. Is this what you felt all along? More or less. You'll grow stronger as you age, faster and more powerful. But the essential experience, yes. Kira looked at her hands, flexing fingers that could now crush stone. I'm really a vampire, immortal. This is my life now. For as long as existence continues, Valdimir confirmed. Are you having regrets? No. And she meant it. Yes, she'd given up the sun and a normal human life, but she'd gained so much more strength, time, and a partner who would walk beside her through the centuries. No regrets at all. Valdimir pulled her into his arms, and when he kissed her this time, it was different. She was no longer fragile, no longer something he needed to be careful with. They were equals now, matched in strength and immortality. I love you, he said against her lips, my brave Kira, my heart. I love you too, she said, my king, my voice in the darkness. In the nights that followed, Kira learned what it meant to be a vampire. She trained with Valdimir and the older vampires, learning to control her new strength and speed. She discovered her own gifts, an ability to sense emotions in blood, to understand the history of a person from their taste. Valdimir said it was rare, a reflection of her empathetic human nature transformed by immortality. She learned vampire politics and law, took a place at Valdimir's side during court sessions. Some of the older vampires were skeptical of a newborn having such influence, but Valdimir made it clear. Kira was his partner in all things, and disrespecting her meant disrespecting the king himself. Emma visited regularly, and though it was strange at first seeing her younger sister age while Kira remained frozen. At 26, they made it work. Valdimir ensured Emma had every advantage in her human life, funding her education and eventually helping her start a nonprofit to help other humans who'd been victimized by vampires. Years passed, then decades. Kira watched the world change from her position in the underground court, saw technology advance and society shift. Through it all, Valdimir was beside her, teaching her and learning from her in turn. On the 100th anniversary of the night he'd first spoken her name, Valdimir took Kira to a chamber she'd never seen before. It was high in the underground palace, with a retractable ceiling that opened to the night sky. I had this built for you, he said, so we could watch the stars together without leaving our sanctuary. They lay on cushions beneath the open sky, and Kira curled against Valdimir's side. His cold skin against hers no longer jarring, just comforting in its familiarity. Do you ever miss it? Valdimir asked quietly. Being human, seeing the sun? Kira thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss the warmth of sunlight on my skin, but I don't miss the fragility, the fear of time running out. And I could never miss what I had as a human more than I love what I have now. And what do you have now? She tilted her head to look at him. You. Forever. An eternity of moments like this. She kissed his jaw. I'd choose this life 1,000 times over. I'm glad, Valdimir said softly, because you are the best choice I've ever made. You gave me back my voice. You gave me back my purpose. You gave me back my heart. We saved each other, Kira corrected. You saved Emma's life, and I saved your existence from being just survival. We gave each other a reason to truly live. They lay in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead. Somewhere above them, the mortal world continued its frantic pace. But here, in the timeless darkness of the vampire realm, two immortals had found something precious, love that would last forever. Valdimir began to speak, his beautiful voice weaving a story about the night sky, about constellations he'd watched form, about the names different cultures had given the stars, about the first time he'd seen the heavens and thought them beautiful. His words painted pictures in the darkness, and Kira listened with a vampire's perfect memory, knowing she'd be able to recall this moment exactly for the rest of eternity. And she smiled, content. This was her life now, her choice, her eternity. She wouldn't trade it for anything in any world.